Hello, everyone.
Hello, Ricky.
Everyone, I guess, just means hi,
That's
Safi.
just you and I.
It's just me and you. Just the participant. I like the participant thing. Just going, just
Yeah,
watching.
no, that is kind of fun.
It's pretty good, baby. There's quite a few of you. I didn't expect that many, but that's nice.
Yeah, there's a lot. There are a lot that registered, different time zones. So we'll see how many actually show, but we send out the recording, so which is nice.
Well, welcome, everybody. Oh, from Las Vegas. Nice. Safi and I are 30 minutes apart, both of us in Dallas, Texas. Not too far. All right, Safi, we're still waiting for people to roll in, but what are we talking about today? What are we doing?
Well, I just want to welcome everybody. Ricky is going to talk to us today about how to onboard your MSP clients from start to finish. Um, and as most of you know, I'm Safi Ferris, this Ricky Cecchini, who's VP of Product here at CloudRadial. And CloudRadial is, basically in a nutshell, is going to help you work better with your clients, for those that don't know. But this is a very interesting, is going to be a very interesting webinar because, we know that the ultimate client experience really is the ultimate service desk. And this is really where it starts, is in that onboarding process. So from here, I'm just going to let Ricky take it away.
Right on. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Like Safi said, I'm Ricky. I'm gonna kind of guide you through now. I know some of you use CloudRadial and many of you don't. Many of you are just trying to figure out like what we're kind of going on about. This topic came out because a lot of our partners that use CloudRadial, I basically synthesized the way that I've talked to them. What do they do for onboarding? How do they scale it up? And I always say this in every webinar, even though I'm a vendor and I definitely want your money, I also try to give you something that you can at least take away for free and at least set up something that should be useful regardless of whether you use CloudRadial or not. We're going to talk about the biggest pain points, what you're aiming for an onboarding, basically how to synthesize that and our own approach and what's worked well for our partners and just getting the MSPs to just, in general, be better about client onboarding. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, the real reason we want to do onboarding, and this is probably pretty apparent to most of you, but I'll state it so we stay top level goal oriented, is to make a better client partnership. And making a better client partnership, obviously, besides sounding good, has some pretty good tangible benefits. So the kind of things we're aiming to get out of a good onboarding, regardless of the systems we use, is we're looking for scalability in clients, meaning that you can obviously handle more or handle, kind of like if you've ever worked in food service, getting double sat, you can handle multiple onboardings at a time without getting overwhelmed and lost in the sauce, right? So having a good process helps you keep that, usable, workable, good process. Number two, which is huge. So Safi kind of touched on something that, we largely, CloudRadial has a lot of different products. Our flagship is CSA. We're going to be framing around CSA today, and I'll even drop the jargon even simpler, really client portal. And we're going to talk about why a client portal, especially during onboarding, which naturally kind of relates to new clients, is going to help you get fewer overall support tickets. And typically, again, the satisfaction of that, the mix of self-service and whatnot you can introduce during an onboarding, unparalleled in terms of efficiency, really, really good to both help you deal with less and also the client have a better experience working with you. And then the real money, which, we've talked a couple times, if you ever caught any of our webinars on like economic uncertainty and just generally like client management, obviously, like just like software, just like any other industry, MSPs are particularly sensitive, especially today, to friction and churn rates, right? So we want to make sure that by having a good onboarding, setting the tone correctly, getting a good taste at the very beginning of the relationship, you do end up seeing a lower churn rate and a better partnership. So if we can kind of stick to onboarding framed around those three things as the benefits, then you're really focused on what you're trying to get out of it rather than just present a cool onboarding. I will say, I'm going to kind of rifle through a lot of the stuff that I have because I have a lot of processes and there's a lot of stuff to go through. So if you have any questions or comments, I think Safi's going to keep an eye on it. I may not stop to talk about stuff, but I will leave time at the end to discuss, to go over specifics and whatnot. So forgive me.
Yeah, and also, and I've mentioned this in the chat, which you probably didn't see, but please put them in the Q&A.
Yeah, sure.
As Ricky's moderator, it's easier for me to comb through there, and then I can either answer or hand them off to Ricky when we open it up for questions. But
Right on. Yeah. So aside from the benefits, let's talk about some challenges. Now, I put these as top. I didn't label them as top challenge number 1, 2, and 3 because from polling our own customers, from having conversations with MSPs that are not our customers, just the MSP channel, tech providers in general, they vary. So there's not anything, but typically I think we can agree that there's a lot of these. The biggest problem that we have fundamentally is communication, right? And the communication comes in many forms, whether that is documentation of existing systems, handoffs if you're coming from, let's call it an incumbent tech provider trying to get credentials handed over, the status of stuff can be a nightmare, all the way down to like having the discussion with the client, right? So after they have become a client, from a prospect to a client, and you're kind of just getting a lay of the land, even though you can gather that stuff, air quote, relatively easily, having that retranslated into something that they can understand from a business peak perspective is tough. So at a really high level, the onboarding is about setting the tone of working with you, providing that clear value, and just making sure that they have a good taste and making sure that they feel like they made the right decision. So there's a lot of stuff that I didn't put on here, but you can kind of fill in the gaps that it's pretty apparent why you kind of need a good process to handle it. And again, as you'll see, I'm not going to advocate CloudRadial being your one-stop shop and only tool for this
but
stuff.
it is, just saying.
And there's no other tool. Ditch everything. Get rid of your RMM, get rid of your PSA. You don't need that. Maybe you do. Okay, maybe don't listen.
Oh, you kind of need those
Kind
things.
of listen to me. I don't know. Form your own opinions. Just give me a chance, guys. Come on. Stop interrupting me. Anyways, CloudRadial CSA platform. Safi touched on this. Again, if you've never heard it, if you've heard of it, I'll give you the quickest gist. It's a platform specifically designed for MSPs, managed service providers, and we're trying to assist in that touch point, kind of gluing together all the touch points from everything you've got, PSA, RMMs, backup tools, security tools, anything that's client relevant, client facing, trying to put those pixels in front of the clients, trying to make it make sense. And obviously that has really big ramifications for how you first introduce that, aka the onboarding, right? So there's a lot to it. This is not going to be a demo necessarily of the product, but I'm going to show you some things. So because I like to sweat and make myself feel nervous, I'll be doing a lot of the stuff live. And we're going to pretend like we're doing a live onboarding, basically starting after I finish this next slide, which is not too long. We got about 40 minutes of straight onboarding talk. So what are we covering today? Again, I've talked about the key benefits we're going after. We're looking after kind of some of those challenges, and I'm going to break it up into really kind of 4 rough chop ideas here. So number 1 is, can you discover and showcase what you found for the client, right? So this is usually kind of in the realm of assessments, any kind of technicality. The technical onboarding is basically everything from inventorying to all the other tools, like maybe the prospect that you brought in and became a client started off with, I don't know, very common is like, some kind of security audit, anything that helps them remember, why they're working for you and how you kind of show that visibility is important. Number 3 is the knowledge transfer. So how are you going to actually enforce usage of something like a portal, building good habits, making sure that you're working with them the best way possible. They know how to work with you. How do you build that relationship? And even then, the 4th one that I like to stick to is the concept of stickiness. So how does the client get attached to you? What are you going to, kind of offer? How's that relationship going to be built around the fact that, frankly, we want it to be kind of painful for them to pull away from the relationship, because we want them so used to working with you. It's so familiar. It's so self-service friendly that the ease of working with you is so good that they're stuck to you, right? It's sticky. Nothing nefarious, I promise, but I think that's like the high level goals. So without further ado, I'm going to treat this like I am one of you guys, and I have CloudRadial. And again, I will reiterate that this is obviously one of the key purposes of having CloudRadial and why we are not just a ticketing portal. This is kind of like the bigger strategy. But again, Safi, cover your ears. You can kind of do this with other stuff, but it's difficult because we purpose built it to do it together. But keep it in mind. I like to be agnostic if I can. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so what I'm looking at is CloudRadial. We have a sample portal, and this sample portal is what we typically use for demos. But the idea here is, and again, this is my very quick, like, let's call it a 2-minute overview, is there's a lot of stuff in a client portal. Ours has typically a lot more features than your built-in, your free portals, whatever, that you can get, even if you spin up something with SharePoint. But I want to clarify that a lot of the stuff that we're working on is not necessarily for the end users. My off
I
failed.
told you not to do it. I
Oh,
told you not to do it
that's
live.
my little joke. You're fine. You're fine. Don't worry. But the point is, I have a bunch of different clients, and you're not really going to see all of that stuff as an end user, right? As an end user, the stuff that's in CloudRadial is kind of light and fluffy if it wants to be, meaning that like there's a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about, like your application links, your bookmarks and stuff, your support tickets, and we'll talk about the how to set a good tone for anything from onboard, offboard forms to general support ticket stuff, all the way down to infrastructure reporting and whatnot. But for the sake of the onboarding, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend I just got a new client. This is maybe a good time to plug it. I know you guys haven't obviously seen the full width of this webinar, but in a couple of weeks, I want to say it's 2 weeks from now, we're doing a separate webinar on how to do the stage before this, which is how to set up a client in CloudRadial or prospect, really, and kind of give them a place to demonstrate both what you can do for them, give them something visual, and kind of almost turn it into a software experience as an MSP to say, this is what it'd be like to work with us. I'm doing a little bit of a similar thing there. If that sounds interesting to you, especially for like more of the sales managers, anything that you want to kind of add a feather in the cap to your prospect presentation, join us for that one. But the gist is here, like we're assuming that you have some kind of understanding of client portals in general. And what I'll do is you have an understanding of some kind of a base of operations for you. Traditionally for MSPs, that's the PSA. So what I'll do here is CloudRadial can connect to the PSA systems. What we're talking about today for client onboarding is not related or not dependent on the PSA systems, but it can do a really cool stuff. This demo tenant I'm working off of is connected to ConnectWise, but we work with ConnectWise and Autotask and Synchro and Kaseya BMS and Halo PSA. Even email connectors work for this. So just keep that in mind as I do a lot of this stuff. But I have the following companies. I'm going to add this brand new company that we're onboarding. So let's go ahead and add them into the portal. I'll look them up from my PSA. And I believe when I was kind of messing around earlier, I was using Brown Brothers Bottling, because I like the triple Bs. Okay, cool. So again, I'm not talking about all the technicality. I'm just creating a brand new company to build this portal off of in CloudRadial. So as I hit submit, this guy is going to get created. It's right here. The user count is 0. What's happening right now is CloudRadial is currently syncing with the PSA, and it's setting up that company. So anywhere from, if it's making me look embarrassed in front of a webinar, probably 30 seconds, anywhere from 15 if the servers are really screaming. It's going to set up the account. It's going to reset the sync. It's going to let me stall while I talk, while I do all that. Has it been that long? Hopefully. We'll see. Let's refresh this page and see where we're at. That'll let me know if I'm close. Hey, 6 people. Okay, so the PSA sync finished. Let's hop into this client and see what happened. And again, I've done pretty much nothing. And this is how CloudRadial is intended to work. So you don't really have anything set up yet. Your client just got created. So I'm going to impersonate an administrator inside of that portal. I will not get an authentication error, so Safi can stop sweating, which is good. And we're going to be in there. So ostensibly what I've done is I've created a shell with a bunch of sample content of forms and everything. If you don't know anything about CloudRadial, all the stuff that you're seeing on screen here comes with your CloudRadial portal. So you don't have to build all the stuff out. There's really nothing custom, and anything custom, air quote custom, I'll do on the call with you guys. I'm going to pretend like it is a straight up new thing. So point number 1, a lot of times when people start with onboardings, they're not looking for just here's a portal, here you go. It starts off with that assessment. So I'm going to start off with something that typically your point of contacts would collaborate with you, the MSP, on. So let's go down to compliance, and we're going to go to our assessment modules. So what I want to do here is I want to establish kind of a precedent, which is the typical MSP does some form of onboarding for that client, and that can relate. I'm sorry, that can be anything from very technical, what are the status of your endpoints, your patching, whatever, all the way to just simple stuff to like who's the main point of contact, whatever. There's a lot of different questions you could ask. So what I'll do is I'll build a brand new one. We're going to call this our onboarding assessment because I'm not very clever. And then I'm going to put that for the description as well. And at this point, you could decide whether this is client visible or only for yourself. That's a separate discussion for a separate webinar, but CloudRadial module, as you can see here. But in the most successful onboardings that I've discussed with our partners, they leave this as client visible. They set this to in progress, right? Because they want to show the client that they're working on their onboarding. And typically this is a just once webinar. I'm sorry, that's what we're doing. This is a assessment. And then you could do it for, set intervals. But right now, I just want the plain Jane just once. So now I've got the shell, and CloudRadial has a bunch of sample assessment questions that you can drop in there. Again, I'm not going to give so much of a tutorial, but I want to give you the greater idea of how to do this. And it comes with an onboarding assessment pre-built into it. There's other security stuff in there. There's more stuff in our community, but take away the fact that we're running an onboarding assessment just this one time. Okay. So this has quite a few questions. I've asked MSPs how they typically onboard customers with assessments, with questionnaires, with whatever. That knowledge transfer is super important. And usually what happens is they have some form of either proprietary thing. You might have built it in Excel, in a Word doc, whatever. They might use a framework from, there's lots of groups out there. You know, I know the Chris Weiser group has some pretty good ones. Robin Robbins, if you're familiar. I mean, you name it. Typically, there's somebody out there that has some checklist for you. And I'm happy to report that if you can get our system, some kind of Excel thing, you can import them yourself so you don't have to stick with stuff. But we also have a sample one to show you, but I'll show you how it works. So I'm going to actually go ahead and run this assessment. And during this onboarding assessment, we're going to basically pretend like we're doing an attempt. So the reason, even when I set this up, I left it as client visible is because now what'll happen is I'm basically saying, yes, let's get started with this thing. Let's answer these questions. And an onboarding assessment in our mind is to basically get the correct frame of reference for the client. So you're showing them, right? You're not keeping this back end. You're not trying to hide the fact that this can be a giant pain because these can be really annoying. I mean, look at the categories of this, right? Everything from environment documentation to network configuration to power to security on the servers, you name it. So this is where I kind of defer to your preference, right? How deep do you want to go with these questionnaires? How much information do you want to have for the onboarding? How much stuff do you want to check? But if you're good and happy with this stuff, we can kind of drill into the details. And you can see that the concept is pretty straightforward. Basically just answering these questions to whatever level you want. Now, the cool thing about CloudRadial, again, it's really focusing on that the onboarding is a collaborative experience. You are not necessarily just white glove hand holding the client. A lot of the stuff requires that back and forth, which is why having a client portal like this that they can get into and play around with and test and stuff is really beneficial. So you can see a lot of the questions, and I'm not going to be painful and read 177 onboarding questions to you guys, but let's just pick on one right here. Is there backup documentation for the servers? It asks the question, it asks, or it explains what it needs to do. This is where a lot of our partners start with an onboarding. Now, when it comes to something like these individual questions, the level of depth that you can get into is again up to you. If you have some compliance-minded MSPs, this can be really deep. A lot of our smaller MSPs and or ones that just have a different process can slim this down. But generally speaking, you can start answering responses on the fly. You can put in your notes go here. You can put in your partner notes that do not show up to the client. And this is where we like to start because we already are setting the expectation that the client knows what you're measuring them on. They know what you're looking for. And even from the onboarding, you're obviously framing your services and whatnot in a way that makes sense to why they even started an engagement with you. But this is a good opportunity for upsell. So let's just say that this client does not have backup documentation, and then you go upsell opportunity. I'll do opti, right? Maybe I flag it for attention. Who's the owner? Who's responsible for this? Let's say the client, right? And I'll even go so far as to, I fold a fake PDF of a backup policy. It doesn't say much, but I have it. Let's say I found a copy of their backup stuff and I want to put it in there. So I'm even going to drag that and leave it on in there. So once I do all that, right, all of a sudden I've got this thing lighten up. They see that there's something to work on. They see something's flagged. They see that there's a note attached. When a client clicks on it, they should be able to see all this stuff pretty easily, right? As they explore the platform with you, you're keeping everything super transparent. And as you go through this platform and take a look, the stuff that you're leaving on the notes will show up separately, not to the client themselves. Even that attachment that we talked about, if you have stuff in files, it's really easy during an onboarding to get lost in the sheer amount of documentation flying left and right. Centralizing that into, in this case, one onboarding assessment, the files are there, we have the scope, we know what's good, we know what's not, is a really great way to frame it to begin with. So again, whether they want to read the existing stuff or whatever, it can be hosted in here, nice and simple. If you want to fly through this stuff, you don't have to do everything one by one. You can just click edit responses and fly through and write your notes on the fly and everything too. But this is where I start the discussion because typically an MSP will go in with something like this. Now, there's a lot of things that can be set to show the tone of the relationship with the client, right? So like I said, maybe some stuff requires deeper discussions. You might find in your onboarding assessment that there are things to work on. Some things are pretty good. Again, referencing this is nice. If there's something that's really simple, right? Maybe we click on it and go like, hey, the backups are not compliant with data retention. That may be a field to change somewhere. It's 2 seconds. Even having the ability to handle that with clients to show them right off the bat, like, hey, we're going to submit this as a ticket and call it a day. Cool. Get a nice error because I didn't set this up with a PSA identifier. Shh, don't tell anyone. That can do that, right? It'll link the ticket. Everything will work hunky-dory. But if there's a bigger issue, right? Let's say something like this backup documentation, that's the upsell opportunity. Maybe we'll add this as a discussion to the greater strategy. So you could handle the little stuff easily. You can handle the big stuff as a more strategic discussion by adding it to the planner. And I promise by the end of this whole webinar, we'll pull all this together and you'll see how this fits. But for right now, I'm going to add this to our roadmap planner. And as we kind of go through a lot of this onboarding stuff, we'll end up with a pretty solid idea of where we are and where to go for the beginning of this client relationship. And that's a nice thing to start off with for these clients. So I'll stick this in continuity. You can customize this, whatever, but we're going to forget about this for a second, right? It's linked to our planner. Okay. So in a nutshell, without going crazy, making this an onboarding or an assessment focused thing, this is where you'd really want to start, is just getting a bearing of how you actually know where to begin with the client, getting everything documented and having that be shareable. Once you have this kind of under control, then the assessment can live here. You can still share it with clients. You can still have them go through it. And that's awesome. But the next thing is, what about the technical stuff and the technical onboarding, the technical documentation and layout of everything from their devices, right? Inventory management, security reports, all the stuff that you typically want to snapshot at the beginning is another thing that's really, really vital to put in front of them at the beginning, right? So your onboarding traditionally is going to generate a lot of those things. How do you put that in front of a client in a way that is comprehensive but not overwhelming? It's a big challenge. So a lot of times what we end up doing is we end up basically asking our partners to use CloudRadial to do that right in here. And if you don't know, CloudRadial has an infrastructure, specifically an endpoint agent that can get put on servers and PCs and whatnot. And any information would show up here. And I'm going to show you what that looks like live in real time, because I think that'll be cool. And then I'll show you what it looks like for a, let's call it a mature client. This is a good way to start to set the tone that you're monitoring stuff. And a lot of the theme of the onboarding, besides just what's wrong, like we saw with the assessment, is also what are we tracking? What's going to be the issue? And long term, that's going to be the core of our discussion of, well, we see all these things, but what about them? We see all these crazy devices and we see all these variances in security and performance and whatnot, but what about them? You can't get to the what about them. You can't get to the sales. You can't get to the improving the client relationship if the client can't really see them. So we have to solve that problem first, which is why this section exists. We have our own agent to do that. Our agent is not an RMM. It does not have any remote capabilities. It is purpose-built to take information from endpoints and servers and feed them in here and eventually run them through policies, which are down here. And they're an easy way to keep stuff really easy and business-minded for the client to understand if there's any risks in these categories, right? Security to productivity to compliance, right? We did a webinar all about these policies. I'm not focused on that. I'm talking about how you get endpoint stuff here. So I'll show how we get our stuff in here natively and how you can get any third-party report stuff in here, which is super important as well, because chances are you probably already have third-party reports that you want to visualize and you want to standardize the process of putting the right stuff in the client's specific portal. So if you do have a service manager, an account manager, or whomever, they know where to go to get that stuff in a centralized location. And it's the same place we talk about putting that stuff with the client. So what does that look like? How do we get an agent in here? What does it look like to even see that information? So back in our other tab, where I kind of have the hive mind control over a lot of these different portals for my different clients, I can click on any one of these, right? So I'll do my Brown Brothers bottling. And then each one of these agents of ours, again, there's also a Mac one, but for right now, I'll just do the Windows EXE. I grab this and then I can deploy this out via RMM. There's a company ID it responds to. There's a whole bunch of stuff on there and how to do that. But the gist is I want this agent on those machines, because when I put that on there, that's what's going to show up in this area. Now I'm running on a Mac, sacrilegiously enough, but I do have parallels, which is cool. So in my Windows environment right in here, let's pop open some stuff. Let's paste that link. Again, you traditionally probably do this via an RMM, but I'm going to run it and see what that looks like start to finish and see how that information even comes through. because I think that would be cooler than just talking about it. So let's do that. I would love to download agents. So what this thing is going to do pretty quickly is it's going to scan my stuff up. Mine will come out pretty janky because it's running on a virtual machine, and that's always going to be pretty funny. I tried to do this before, so we probably don't want to do that, actually. But that's why I brought it back up, so don't you worry, fellas. I brought it in here. At scale, it's going to end up looking like this. So these are a bunch of machines that have the agent pulled up on them. The agent is going to report the data in once per day, typically. You can force it to restart and report in stuff, but that's going to keep the information nice and fresh. And then ultimately, the type of information that you can get from our agent is pretty similar to an RMM. Ultimately, we're looking for everything from what's the storage look like to what are the OneDrive usage to what's the configuration details, blah, blah, blah. Not for the purpose of overwhelming the client, but as a part of the onboarding process to document the core infrastructure, document the core inventory, right? And then eventually to have discussions that are going to look more interesting than just that green thing across the board. So as we shift past the onboarding phase, this is the stuff that people can have, more of a QBR style conversation on it, right? How are we doing with this? How are we doing with that? What are we going to do about those that are expired, those we're running old technology, so on and so forth. But ultimately, this is kind of what I'm after. So that's the gist of how you can start to put in some stuff. Now, there's going to be questions because there always are on complex environments, right? Not everyone just has a laptop and a server. You start getting into IoT stuff, mobile devices, whatever, some stuff that our agent technically can't handle. Does that stuff go away? Does that mean that Brown Brothers bottling is limited to just endpoints? No, right? We have to solve that problem holistically, which is the stuff that we can run that we should focus on that needs rules and whatnot. Yeah, visualize that. Everything else still deserves a spot, but deserves a spot out of the way. So if our assessment gives us the big level picture and high level projects and kind of documentation, and our endpoint data shows us some documentation of, live data from those devices and whatnot, under compliance, our report archives is where you're going to want to put those third-party reports. So let's talk about that as well, because during a client onboarding, this is one of the first things that our customers, our partners, hammer in on pretty good. So you can see that I've already got 2 folders that I might stick reports into automatically. You can create these globally. You can have standard folders that appear on everybody's stuff, but maybe Brown Brothers Bottling is a unique client. They might have some different reports. During the onboarding, you're finding out how they work, right? What do they need to operate? What's nice? What could expand? Who knows? So for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to add one of these folders, these report archives, and I'm going to go ahead and add in a technology review. I'm going to keep it generic and call it technology review because this is where you can supplement your own knowledge, right? Again, you might have an RMM. You might not want to do the CloudRadial agent. You might want to skip on all the policy stuff. I wouldn't recommend it because I think that stuff's pretty cool. But hey, I'm not your boss, right? You can put in anything you want from any tool, whatever, get that centralized location. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time messing around with retention rules or alerting because it can do some of that stuff, which is cool. Letting you know if you start scheduling reports in here, if it misses a report after a certain amount of days or whatever happens, you can get a ticket, proactively handle that stuff. But the real gist is I'm building a folder to store stuff, and you're going to be storing a lot of stuff during an onboarding, right? So now I have my global reports nestled between those, my technology review, right? Could be an RMM report, could be a State of the Union. So when I have this folder, now what I can do is through the settings, I can start emailing that in to this proprietary folder. So very common that when an MSP gets something like CloudRadial, they'll set up the companies just like I did. They'll set up the report archives. And the first 2 things, if you take away nothing from this onboarding, is it does significantly help streamline that onboarding if you assess where they're at and just start funneling the reports. Because that point of contact, that person you're working with, they can already see the sheer amount of work you've done, and you haven't made that invisible, and you haven't made that dependent on whether they check their emails or not, which is one of the key goals for that transparency. So I could email this stuff in, it'll take a sec. You can also just drag and drop stuff in here. So I'm going to add a report. I already pre-prepared a generic one. Here we go. So let's say this is your RMM report or your security report or your backup report, you name it, right? I fundamentally have found a way to get it in here. And ultimately, when the client comes back and goes, what do we need to work on? What's up? You can succinctly say, hey, here's that report. Here's where you were at time and date and blah, blah, blah. here it is, let's take a look. Okay, cool, it's in here, and let's pop it open and start reading through it, right? So if you have RMM data or whatever else, you have it in there. That's super important because I don't think anybody will disagree internally or externally that onboardings are super overwhelming, right? So this is what I was talking about before. Making information available but not obnoxious is the name of the game. How do I get all this technical data, state of the union stuff there in a way that doesn't overwhelm them? Well, again, report archives, some kind of centralized repository is super important. So if we can get those two out of the way, right? Again, I'm not going to do it, but your traditional onboarding might have a bunch more folders with a bunch more stuff. You are now left with a portal that shows kind of where to start off on, how to approach this. And the nice thing about CloudRadial is you can publish these, the sets of questions. I should have mentioned this earlier. And you can decide whether these are global, right? Do these go to everybody? Do you have more specific ones? Do you have a kind of more nuanced, tailored assessment for whatever, for medical clients, so on and so forth? You can run those nuances, or in what a lot of the partners that I talk to, they just basically just tweak one. They have one pretty good onboarding thing. They started off, that's where they begin after they create the company, and we're off to the races. They're running off of that template, which is what I did. And again, the one I'm using in CloudRadial was derived from our partners, and it's something that comes stock with it. But anything you can think of, just go ahead and import it in there, and it'll work. There's a format for Excel, but pretty easy, especially with AI. You just say, format this to CloudRadial standards, you're good to go. Then all the other technology stuff's in there. Again, the agent stuff can be in there. And again, I talk about the infrastructure because I think this is a cool thing to start visualizing it. But then you get into one of the biggest pains for onboarding, which is knowledge transfer, documentation. And that isn't quite here or there because yes, we have those pieces of data, right? Those reports and whatnot. When I'm talking about documentation, I'm talking about really how do we start working together? Like what's the proper process, whatever. CloudRadial does not only cater to brand new onboarded clients, just like any portal does, right? Chances are you probably have existing clients that you can onboard, not as a new client, but as a welcome to our new process of working with stuff. And a lot of that circles around how useful is your base of operations, your portal, your mutual shared workspace, which is what this can be, right? So for simplicity, yes, we obviously call ourselves a client portal, but there's a reason why CloudRadial's brands itself as a CSA, a client service automation tool, not just client portal, because there's more to it than that. Case in point about this stuff, if you have all of those reports and stuff in there, you've kind of taken care of the needs of your point of contacts, the client person that you're working with to review what needs to be done. But if you really want to maximize the solution and you really want to take care of the third point that I mentioned earlier, which was on reducing churn, reducing friction, then simultaneously in the onboarding, you have to set a good experience documentation-wise, training-wise, contact information-wise for anybody that accesses it. A lot of the partners in CloudRadial, partners being MSPs, decide to roll out the portal in a couple different ways, but primarily they want to roll it out to the points of contacts and as many users as can use it, because the more people that develop habits and use cases and stuff from your portal, the stickier you are, right? The more you can get people to rely on your workflows or something you provide for them, the harder it is to slot you out with something else, right? Software does it, MSPs do it too. It's just building habits on stuff. So as it relates to training, as it relates to documentation, what can you do? Well, most MSPs have some form of documentation. Most of the time it's something internal, right? So IT Glue, fantastic tool, Hoodoo, Glue, right? There's a billion different documentation systems. And what we're positing here is, can you build something that is simple to use and easy and something that is worthwhile for the clients, right? So CloudRadial has a built-in knowledge base. I'm not here to tell you this is the best knowledge base in the world, but I'm here to tell you it can be one of the more useful ones. Why? Well, if you start building some documents, you can see that we've got a couple of pretty simple ones locked and loaded in here. You can always add more. And this is the stuff that we can get into, whether you want to write it yourself or pull it from your own documentation. You start to, especially during the onboarding, want to really drive those clients towards building habits to check your portal for stuff. And I'll give you a future roadmap for us too, or what we're working on right now that you're not seeing. A lot of this stuff is basically already going to be obsolete because what we're already moving towards is building those KBs, building that knowledge share. So ultimately, whenever we have something that can crawl those things, AI wise, right, you have a nice base of operations that is really rich. So AI can crawl this thing today through our CloudRadial chat. They're kind of getting merged together, but that's neither here nor there. And you didn't hear from me. But that's really cool, right? So the more documentation, the more information, the more details about the client, from the endpoints to this to that, the richer and smarter that information is going to be, the more helpful it's going to be for the client. And they don't have to crawl through a billion articles. But that documentation still has a lot of purposes. And again, we've tried to make it really easy for you to succinctly and summarize and put that in there. Documentation is one thing. Training is another really big one. And this is one that is super important. Again, I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you why a lot of the pre-built like PSA portals don't have a lot of training or any training in there, but it is one of the most successful things that our partners do when it comes to onboarding a client. Because yes, the day-to-day ones get that assessment and you know, all the technical reports day-to-day being point of contacts. Your average Joe user that really wants to get in the portal and start getting in and mastering it can get into training, and this is one of the stickier things to do. So training, right, refers to CloudRadial's built-in LMS, and the built-in LMS comes pre-filled with a bunch of courses, so you don't have to go being creative and making your own and all that. The ones that I have in this tenant all come free with CloudRadial, so there is a ton. Now, in addition to that, right, you can always build your own. They can build their own. The builder itself is super simple, but we're not here to focus on how to build a course. We're really here to focus on what this means for you. Because if you can start building courses on anything, right, you can basically build once, cry once, and be done. That's really easy. So part of your mandatory onboarding, the most successful partners that we see build courses on anything from how to submit a ticket in regards to you, right, your processes, or how to work on so-and-so, how to do whatever. And enforcing and having that training be in the same place that they do all the other stuff is not only a much better client experience and very easy, but also really efficient for you, right? There's incentive for you as an MSP to want to do this stuff, because if you can train people consistently, you scale the way clients work with you, it's really, really easy to manage expectations and understand where to get those resources, rather than treating every client like an ad hoc nightmare, which they can get really fast. So a lot of the training in here, again, is pre-built for you. So whether you're having issues and a lot of tickets coming in from, let's say, I don't know, like you're seeing a lot of 365 ones, right? A lot of usage stuff, people giving you errors that aren't really bugs. They're just people don't know how to use things, all the way down to how to set goals, or I don't know, we have some security ones further on in here, but you can see that there's a lot to pick and choose from. Training, bar none, is a good way to do it. The other cool thing about the training bit is that in addition to being sticky, in addition to assisting the onboarding, right, you don't have to overwhelm them with a bunch of courses. There's visibility into their completion too. So it's not just empty rhetoric, just going, please do training, we hope that it helps. You can start enforcing that, and a lot of good MSPs do that. You don't have to enforce training on absolutely everything, but if there is something that you require, you know, maybe you have a point of contact, an office admin, you know, a C-level executive that you want to make sure they get specifically a training session on how to do something in the way that you want, best way to do it is to standardize it. And again, you can track the progress by student, by course, however you want, see what's required, see if they did it. And that should be a part of the conversation. Again, an onboarding is a mutual agreement that they will do stuff with you. So put those resources in front of them, from the documents they should read to the courses they should do, to get them to work with you exactly the way you want to. The clearer you can be about the way that you want them to interface with you, the better client they will be. The more structure you give them, again, ultimately, the easier it is to scale them. So I know I'm jumping around from assessments to some of those report archives to now we're training, but these are the highly specific and selected components that repeatedly I see our MSPs bounce to that work for the onboarding.
So, Ricky, I wanted to ask you something here.
Sure.
When you're working through this onboarding process,
Mhm.
do you normally, is this the time to explain to the customer that some of the stuff is collaborative, like they can add a course or they can add, and not they, it'd have to be an admin, they'd have to have a specific role, but that they're able to also utilize this portal for their internal needs to some degree? And I mean, do you get into that at that onboarding, or is it too much information? Is it information overload?
That's a fantastic question. I'm glad you asked. Well, Safi, knows that I work with the implementation team too. I used to be the chief implementer of
The
CloudRadial.
implementation team.
Yeah, I used to be the implementation team. And I'll tell you this isn't a CloudRadial webinar thing. This is me talking to you as just a dude. I know for a fact that something like CloudRadial specifically, can be really complex. It's got a bunch of features and stuff. And like, it's a good time, like during this webinar, we're talking about what you can do. That's a good mention, right? All I want you to take away from this is that you can do that in CloudRadial. If I can get that association done, I'm happy. I am not on a mission to tell you how to create a course or how to do this or how to do that. For right now, you can do that. Once the whoa, there's a lot of stuff. Oh my God, he's jumping around. Wow, he talks really fast, wears off. Naturally, you'll get to the part going, it would be cooler if I could add my own course. It'd be cooler if I could add my own document. So to answer your question succinctly, no, I wouldn't do it right off the bat. I would mention it. Once they have acclimated, once the onboarding period is kind of over and they're slowing down and they're like, what else can this thing do? These articles don't speak to my needs. These application links, these bookmarks don't speak to my products. That's when you get into the fly trap of, well, you can add your own, we can show you how, and that's part of the stickiness. So good question. Hold off.
The other thing I wanted to go over just a couple of questions while we're here a little bit. Barack, I'm gonna mess up your name, but I've got a strange name, so I'm used to it. So I'm sure you are too. But Barack Sarak,
Hey,
I think is a new client, but I'm not sure.
We just chit-chatted yesterday. I sent him an email.
Oh, okay. So he said, he was asking about when you were doing the assessment, and he said, here we create a one-time assessment. But that assessment is not one time, because you can do additional runs on it to show the progress. I mean, that's how I answered it, is that you have the ability to run it periodically to show progress. It's not necessarily a one-time run.
That's true. I'll show you another example of what we're talking about here. And this is a general question about assessment capability, because some assessments, again, in theory, are one time, right? If I ask you how your onboarding is, you're typically doing that on a one-timer because you're like, okay, this is the things we need to get done, whatever. Maybe not. Maybe we've got a different process, but we allow the flexibility. Like a NIST assessment or some kind of compliance thing traditionally is ran, right? Once a year, once a quarter, once a month, depending on what you're aiming for, whatever. So if I go into, this is another company, right? The one we're working on is Brown Brothers. You can see the name at the top. This one's Azurative Technology. But for argument's sake, I can run an onboarding assessment a bunch of times. And then if you do it a bunch of times, right, it makes more sense probably for the NIST one. What you can ultimately do is have the same framework, have the same questions, and then benchmark. So running those questions and being like, okay, this is how you did last quarter. How are you doing this quarter? Is as easy as clicking on this and going run. Every time you click on the dots and go run, it's going to generate a new attempt of that assessment. That's cool because, like you're saying, Safi, if you start getting to the point where you're trying to show them that you're growing over time and it's not just, here's how you did, you got a D on security. A D on security can be terrible if you were an A client yesterday. It can be fantastic if you had a big fat F, a 0, right? You've shown a lot of growth. So the comparison concept is super easy for the client to grasp because you basically are just saying, here's how we're doing, and I should have practiced for thing. But that's the gist, right? You could say, here's all the different dates we ran this. How have you grown over time and all these questions? So even though I put one timer, this is just a label. This is just the recommended, right? That's why it doesn't say when it will be auto run. But yeah, you can do it as many times as you want.
Okay, that's what I thought. The other thing I was going to ask is, and I answered this, the question was, can reports be added by URL or FTP? And the answer is no. However,
no. URL, no, that'd be the email, but we have an API.
This is going into the report archive.
Yeah.
So, but and he has they store their customer documentation in a SharePoint doc library. But what I was saying is that you could put that, and you may want to show it, but on that application page, you could put a link to that SharePoint or link to their file storage in one of these applications so that they can easily get to that link. I mean, do you think that's the best solution?
It depends on how technical you are. That's a good question. And a lot of people have concerns over the transferal method of like documents to the portal. Now, what you want to do if you have sensitive nature stuff and you don't want to have to deal with like email, right? Because that could be, intercepted or whatever. Drag and drop is probably safer. But like if you really get into the weeds, that we do have an open API to our report archive so you can write specifically and pull from those things. So you can also
Oh,
bypass that.
okay.
If that's familiar to you and you're in CloudRadial, I'll show it for a second because I think this will make other people that are not API savvy tilt. But basically, we have a Swagger and everything in there, and part of that stuff is specifically archive items and whatnot. So you can write specifically to there. You can create
Okay.
archives and put stuff
All
in.
right. So I was a little bit wrong. So I'm glad that I asked that.
You're not wrong. You're alternatively right because you could still do what you said. I think a lot of times MSPs just want the most secure and easy way to kind of automate the document. I say dump is the nice word, but that's a good question too.
Okay, and then this cracks me up. So Dan Green said, it's not about the product. The webinar is fantastic, but I just want to ask if Ricky is wearing an AS Roma football
I
shirt.
am wearing an AS Roma. Yeah, sure am. I'm a Roman man. Don't be fooled by the American
Yeah,
accent.
Ricky's Italian and
Non sono americano.
fluent in
Adesso vengo
Italian.
qua e faccio i webinar per queste persone. Non lo so perché, but I do it anyway because, why not? We can do it. Shh. Don't blow my American cover.
Okay, I'm sorry. I really side railed you, but
I know. Well, the AS Roma thing always brings joy because usually people are like, nice jersey. What's the wolf? Like, shush. Anyways, okay, so I want to keep it focused. Again, recap. I know I recap a lot, but I talk a lot, and it's mostly for me, not even for you guys. Assessments are cool, flexible. We want to do this to state stuff. Technical documents, get them in there. Whether it's the agent or the third party stuff, whatever method that you want to put the stuff in there, super important for documentation, easy peasy. Next step, document training, any kind of stickiness to get that right tone. You actually touched on, Safi, the next thing I was going to mention. I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that bookmarks are mind blowing because bookmarks are bookmarks, but it's just another thing that can help them start their day off, right? So a lot of partners get a lot of good feedback from their clients because they go like, hey, cool, you've added my app. Hey, cool, I can get into whatever, right? And when you're onboarding a client and you give them access to the billing portal and the security portal and this thing and then this thing, and then you want them to pay their bill, and like, good God, right? So even having a basic thing where you go to our one portal, our company portal, you click on the thing and you have access to all your bookmark links is good, right? Even that is a simple way to at least, even when you create documentation separate from CloudRadial, separate from anything, and you go, here is the one-stop shop place, we're going to do it. We're good to
Well,
go.
it's a really nice feature for internally in the office. And I speak from experience because we use it. So like for my marketing team, I have all the applications that they use in one place. So, they can always go and know where to go and get and it just makes it an easier launch pad, than maybe your bookmarks or, because everything is right here. So, that customization is nice.
It is, and it's true. I mean, even when we talk about it from ourselves, from our own perspective as a software company, when you onboard a new employee, right? Not a new company, but a new employee, and like Safi said, they're part of marketing. How do you get them all the resources at once? Now, there's answers to this. There's plenty of people that do it, with anything from training guides to here's figure it out, here's a PDF, or here's a general library. But it is nice when you can specifically say, hey, at CloudRadial, you're a marketing person. We use HubSpot. We use Beamer, which is our in-app notification system. If they need eyes on that stuff and I want to make sure I can do it, maybe I want to build marketing as a category. And I want to say, like, this is HubSpot. Okay. And then we go to our app.hubspot.com, whatever, right? Throw a little security on there. All the cute customization stuff, you can even iframe it and whatnot. But the idea now is that by person, right? I'm going to do that. Boom, it works. I don't want to log in and show you guys all my HubSpot stuff. That's secret. But still, that's the idea. When you get in here, even filing it down and going, that doesn't apply to everyone, right? Again, this is not a CloudRadial symposium of all the cool stuff you can do in CloudRadial, but we built that logic in there because that's exactly the questions you should be asking during onboarding. It's how do I get everybody what they need in the easiest, fastest, most repeatable way? And if you can build a process, right? Say you do use CloudRadial, your onboarding checklist for a client is basically run assessment, drop stuff in, set core bookmarks, and set up a 15-minute call to show them how they get to the stuff, and you're done. Next client. And the rest of the actual deliverables, that's, again, service and project management or whatever, end up interfacing with this portal as the go-between. So it is the platform that you serve to set the expectation. That's really what this onboarding webinar is about, is not necessarily let me dump a bunch of features. It's developing the strategic features that make the most sense, that make their life easier. And when they go, how do I get to, you go, the portal. How do I submit the ticket on the portal? How do I check on the document, the portal? Having something like that, again, Safi doesn't like this, but I'll say it anyways, is not a CloudRadial specific thing, but it is a onboarding facilitator, right? So again, I don't care if you do this with crayons and SharePoint, you can do it. Make it easy for the client. That is the core onboarding, and it makes it easy for you too. So when we get into the last bit, I'll say this too, right? So I talked about a little bit of these things, right? From training stuff to whatever, all the way down to like, we'll talk about the planner for a second, because we have this account planner, right? I'll go down to Brown Brothers Bottling. And the planner, generally speaking, in CloudRadial is used to give people a high level view of the stuff that they need to do, the stuff we're doing for them, the stuff that they need to do in the future, and so on and so forth. But when I look at a lot of the things in here, right, you can preload a lot of your services in here to say, hey, you're already paying us for managed security, or hey, we're going to move into managed backup in Q4. So like even having a really simple visual roadmap is really awesome. And then remember that documentation that we created from the assessment that I said, we'll worry about it later. That got added in here when I added as a planner card. So all of a sudden what you're doing is you've given them a contextual place to put their stuff. You made it easier to work with you because you made it very clear where they get stuff and what they want you to do. And this is the future, right? So even on the onboarding where I'm shaking your hand, I'm saying, what's up? I'm not knocking on their door. I'm not saying MSP should knock on their freshly onboarded clients or currently doing onboard and try to upsell them. But this is a golden time. This is the time where you are going to put, bar none, the most effort making sure the client is happy, the client, you know them, whatever. It's like first date, first, second date, right? You are dressed the best, you smell the best. This is good stuff. So the more stuff you can identify here and just go, FYI, before you start complaining that some tech said a weird thing, you didn't like that response, or the time took whatever, you could say, hey, we just found this thing. We found this documentation issue, right? Maybe we want to take care of that. Maybe we can keep kicking this can down the road, but discovery of these things can lead to projects. So you're basically hedging your bets, you're pre-filling a lot of these things as you go through it. That add to planner button is kind of the core thing. It's really simple. There's not much to it, but as we go through a lot of these things, right? Assessment questions are a good example. Back in my endpoint report, maybe the compliance policies are a good example. Say like, you got the CloudRadial agent, it's spinning stuff up, the compliance policy caught that you have old technology or whatever. Here's all the old technology according to my standards. I'm going to add that to Planner. What you've now done is you've turned that portal into a really clear place to do all the stuff, and also a clear place to have that discussion for the future. So the value of your portal is not cool tickets, which I'll talk about tickets now, because that's the easiest way to get the fastest benefits to you. But it is a really great way for the client to have framed context all in one without overwhelming them. Like, just go get the information if you want to, or don't if you don't want to. They could not log into this for 2 weeks. Come discussion time, they have all the context again. They go, oh, yeah. They're not jumping to a million portals. They're not trying to figure out what happened in their emails 3 weeks ago. It's there. The onboarding is so much smoother. When it comes to tickets, right? Tickets are a hot commodity. How do you get people to come back to the portal? Well, a lot of MSPs are going to work on that ticket, right? The service side. In CloudRadial, especially when you're hooked up to a PSA specifically, you're going to get the ability to see the tickets. Now, Brothers Bottling, I didn't create any staging stuff because I'm doing this live on the call. If they were a new client, you probably wouldn't have any tickets in there. If they're an existing client like Azure Technology over here, when I go to their tickets are being pulled in via API from our PSA, in this case, ConnectWise. So I can see a lot of the stuff on here and I can start drilling into what's happening with a lot of these things, right? Who's submitting it and whatnot. Now, this is cool because now we can start to visualize the fact that the communication is there. Yet another reason to go back. When they submit a ticket from the portals, let's do that right now, right? Getting them to understand that this is also the place where they submit and whatever is the fastest way to get service efficiency. It's the fastest way to get the fastest responses, because all the technicalities to CloudRadial forms, and we have a billion, everything from sales things to webinars to how these things work, how the forms work. But the gist is you ask the right questions on the first pass, they're routed to wherever you want to. So to your boards, your queues with the right status, with the right priority, with the right subtype, with the right source, right? Even the source is nice, because ultimately what you want to happen is when you onboard a client and you start to stabilize how you work with them, you also want to track how efficient and how used a lot of this stuff is, because you know that if they use something like this, the time for you to support and manage them is going to go down dramatically and their experience is going to be better. It's kind of like trying to teach a kid to take medicine. It tastes like crap, but I promise you, it'll taste better. People largely don't want to log into stuff because they want to take the easy way, but I promise you if they do it, it's much better for them. Luckily, we do 365 login, so that's easy, but you know what I mean. And most popular feature, bar none, in CloudRadial is onboard, offboard forms. These are some stock ones that come with the portal, but like even having that, right, gives them a really easy way. You onboard a new client, you say, here's your reports, here's the things we need to work on. Oh, by the way, when you need an issue, when you need a new thing, answer these questions in this thing. We'll get to it immediately. It goes right to our queue. That's the stuff that starts to really, really build that understanding, that reliance on that portal, and starts to make that relationship scale a lot better. Which is
when you go back and you look at everything that a service manager is responsible for, you've got the clients hanging on you, you've got to worry about your techs being consistent with, service, your vendor changes, things that leadership or your management is expecting from you. At the end of the day, I think what CloudRadial really does is it gives you a platform to manage all of this so that you can deliver not only exceptional service, but, dovetail into that exceptional, client experience. And I think on the first slide, when you came into the webinar, we say, CloudRadial helps you bridge the gap between service delivery and customer success. It really does. And the portal is very powerful, and it gives you a space, gives them a space, so that everybody can work really well together.
yeah. One of the other things that I'll leave you guys on a tip, because this is one of them, let's call it a minor feature of CloudRadial. There's no such thing as a minor feature, but it is not hard to set up. Is like, if you're just taking away anything, right, of like how you can make it easier, then like familiarity is cool. CloudRadial is modular. So if you don't see yourself using a lot of the features in here, you could turn them on, you could turn them off, you do whatever. But I'll show you a really simple one that gets a lot of like praise from partners. It takes 2 seconds. I'll do this on the call, and I have no fear of this going wrong because it's awesome, right? Look at this thing right here. See this little banner? It says, welcome to the Client Hub. We're excited to show you, get started below the orientation video. I'm pretty sure it's a Rickroll because I set this up. It's a Rickroll, but you know what I mean? You can set up your own video. The other cool thing is like something really simple that happens in onboarding is like, okay, let's say you buy into all this and you're like, all right, sure, CloudRadial, I'll give you a shot. I have a client portal, whatever. It does all these cool things. I've chained everything together. You want to be able to answer the question when the client's like, how do I work with you? You want to ultimately make it easy to work with you, because what people take away from the MSP relationship is basically, are they a pain in the butt to work with, or are they good, right? We've talked to partners. I did a webinar with a really awesome partner of ours in Australia, First Focus IT. They're one of the, I think they are the biggest MSP in Australia, or at least one of top three. I mean, really, they're huge.
They're the largest.
And they talked about what their how they came to CloudRadial, why they came to it, and basically their biggest issue, they hired an independent survey agency to talk to their clients and go, what do you want when you work with an MSP? Clients came back with 2 things, not 50, not 800, not one, 2 things. They said, number one, transparency. I just want to be able to see stuff when I feel like it. I want to be able to ignore your emails and calls and check on stuff when I feel like it. And number two, communication. That when I talk to you, or when I want to talk to you, I can. That's it. Everything else is just bonuses and or I don't cares. So to that point, let me show you this super simple feature. In CloudRadial, one of the easiest things you can do is set up banners. Like I showed you that little Rickroll one up here. Here's a cool thing you can do. I'm going to add a banner right here. This is like, check out how useful this could be. I already copy pasted this because I didn't want to watch you guys, or you guys don't want to watch me struggle type. But here you go. Meet your IT support squad. Let's slap a bunch of stuff that formatted weird, but whatever. I'm going to place that on the home page for them. I'm going to make it yellow, and I'm going to flip it on the right sidebar. I can set it to run for whatever. Ignore all the customization settings. Really, what this is for is to show you what it can do, is basically saying like, can you answer the question, what do you want me to do and how do you want me to do it, really quickly? The portal lets you, right? So now that I set up that banner, you log into the portal and you go, let me show you. Here's your apps. Here's your thing. Here's your account manager. Here's his email, his phone. Here's the emergency number. Cool. For everything else, go take your training, go submit the ticket, go check out the assessment. It's there. Every question the client goes, what about X? Check the portal. Do that. Check the portal. Check the portal. Check the portal. Setting that tone, setting that relationship is tangible by the feature. It sets a better thing, expectation. It sets better response time. You can do this. It's really not the worst thing. And onboarding is one of the nearest and dearest things to my heart, because if you do it right during the onboarding, if you get that secret sauce right, you're gonna have such a better time with that client. They're gonna be so much more profitable and willing to stay. The hurdle is how you set it up and basically which features appeal to your MSP. Obviously, I'm the vendor. I'm gonna spit every feature I got at you and go, this can be useful, this can be useful. The ones I talked about, chained in the way I talked about it, are genuinely how our partners do it. Now,
It's interesting here, Ricky,
oh,
Vincent Smith,
too.
Vince is on our
Hey, what's
webinar.
up, Vince?
He said the one-click access from CloudRadial Teams app, and that's something we forgot to mention, greatly decreased call volume and email tickets for clients. We could implement it, for most.
yeah,
So,
I
and
was,
that is nice to have. That's how I get into it internally
huh?
from you to our portal is through Teams.
I'll show you exactly what Vince is talking about. Thanks, Vince. What's up, dude? What he's talking about is a little bit extra for our cases, but extra meaning that like I didn't even plan for it, but it's totally applicable. So a lot of the success and onboarding of your portal of any kind of touch point is largely predicated by not the shininess, not the features, not how much you call them, but how easy it is to get into. And if you make it hard for your clients, your freshly new client to access your stuff, they're not going to use it. I don't care how cool it is because at the end of the day, they're running their business. They have their stuff. They're thinking about their lunch and their boss and whatever. They're not thinking about you most of the time. When they are thinking about you, you better make it easy to access it. So what Vince is saying is you've been looking at all this stuff in a web app, right? Literal URL. You can do portal.yourmsp.com. Most MSPs, they get the best success, throw in their old teams, and then they throw the portal in teams. And because we're M365 addicts, it can get framed in here, which the ramification for that is instant login, instant access on their phone, on their desktop. They don't have to go anywhere new. They don't have to remember anything. It's just boom, login. That's a cool thing for portal usage in general, but especially cool when you consider, again, for onboarding purposes, how do I work with you? I'm already in your teams. Easy enough, right? You click a button, you're there, and the rest of it is just like, hey, how do I open your teams? Click on the support, report a problem, request service. This is our own internal company one, and we're not hooked up to a PSA, so it's going to be kind of boring, but it works just the same exact stuff, just fine. So,
My computer's not working. My
right.
internet's slow.
But it's accessibility is super easy. So thank you for sticking around. I know we kind of did the Q&A in the middle, but I would like to say that if you want to see what it can do and how it can scale up the onboarding, we genuinely think of this stuff. We know what other partners are doing. We're happy to work with you to figure out even spitballing ideas that work for you. But we think very highly of our MSPs and they're clever devils, and they've done a lot of really cool stuff to try to solve this onboarding hurdle to get that those key benefits out to their clients and themselves. And again, the big thing is if you can do this, I don't really care how you do it, you will see a lot of benefits. And that's hopefully what you're here for as well. So thank you for letting me yap at you for a very long time. Much appreciated. Saf, anything else you want to close with? I know we're already over.
No, I put the link to the next webinar, which is, and I can't remember the name exactly, but it's how to land clients using CloudRadial, and Ricky is going to show you how to use it during the sales process or the sales call, how to spin up a portal while you're at a client's office real quick. And basically, and CloudRadial is an awesome differentiator. And so, and I've always said this years and years ago, if I have two MSPs sitting here and I'm trying to decide which one, both of them are really, really nice guys. But this guy right here has got this unbelievable next generation portal where I can see all my stuff. I can communicate, and basically they have prioritized their communication and transparency with me. So, that's the one that I would typically go with. So, Ricky's kind of going to go through all of this in that, mock sales call. So if you've got time, would love for you to join. And that's in a couple of weeks, which I
Yeah.
think is what, the 27th, I believe.
Yeah.
It'll be on the landing page, exactly, but y'all should check it out. But we
Anyway,
really
you can get
appreciate your time. If you have any questions, comments, you're more than happy to reach out to us.
I think that's it. I think
That's it.
thank you guys for letting me talk. And again, if you have any questions or stuff through the demo, reach out to us. I'm literally Ricky@CloudRadial.com. You can always email me directly. Happy to talk off the record. But thank you for joining. I'll catch you guys for the next one. I'll see you later.